Welcome to Disciples. We're on a journey to becoming like Christ. None of us really like to get lost, although in our cars now, it's a lot harder to get lost with GPS helping us along the way. I got lost one time in my church, and it was a church that I worked at, and that was kind of embarrassing. I was showing a new person at the church around and showing them different places. Oh, these were the educational wings, and here's where the kids meet, and over here's the library. And then I ended up walking down a hallway, and I realized that I had never been down this hallway. I was like, huh. I even had keys to open the door to get into the next hallway. Churches are kind of funny. As years go on, we add buildings and hallways, and we add the education wing, and then we add the fellowship hall. It becomes a hodgepodge of yeah. I do need help getting there. There is a critical way that we lose people, and it's not just our building. It really is about the way that we make disciples. What is our discipleship pathway? For many of us, in many churches, it allows folks to get lost along the way. There's no clear pathway from how do I start my life in Christ and how do I continue to grow and mature? The journey of being a disciple, we can get lost along the way. And so today what I wanted to talk about is what are some of the ways, how do we as a church body make disciples? And I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint here and kind of show you a little document that might help us. So when my daughter, when two of my daughters were in high school, they were involved in musical theater. And it was an amazing thing. I was so surprised at what I learned about musical theater. I'd always just been in sports and other things. And so I learned a ton. And so this is a metaphor for the church and how we make disciples, because this idea is that there are things that can help us in our process, in our journey to becoming like Christ, that can help actually or hinder in a church. And so here's a few things. Think with me for a little bit. So in this illustration, we'll have the congregation and the worship service, and that box is the pulpit. And we'll just say that discipleship starts here. You could point in a lot of different places, but we'll start here. There's growth and proclamation and worship, and those help. But very few people would say that's all we need to do. Although I did have a pastor one time I worked with, and he said, if I was always told that if I had a nice suit and I preached a good sermon and I had a crowd, that I was done, like I had done my job. And he's like, I know that's not right. But every one of us have what we would call a front stage. And the front stage is where the action happens. My daughter, Betsy, her senior year got to be one of the lead roles in Pretty in Pink. And so it was really fun to watch her be there. And it was crazy to see her sing all these solos in front of all these people. But like that in a church, there is a front stage to discipleship. And that's the way that we make disciples through kind of visible and organized ways. Oh, it's the men's and women's group. It might be the small group ministry at a church or Sunday school. All those things are organized and visible. They hit the bulletin. They're on our websites. It's obvious. Just like if you're watching a play, that's the front stage. You watch what's going on the front stage of the play. And there you learn and grow and mature. But the interesting thing, when Maggie was a senior, my youngest daughter, Betsy, or Maggie, was a freshman. And Betsy invited Maggie to come and help in the play. Now, as a freshman at this school, you were not allowed to be on the front stage, but she could certainly be in the backstage. And so, scene 3, she got to bring the little bench out with one of the other people in the backstage, helping to make sure that the theater happened. And backstages are a myriad of things going on: lights, curtains, stage props, microphones, the orchestra pit. All these things add up to make a play work. And likewise, in discipleship, there is a backstage that happens. And I would say that the backstage is kind of invisible and organic. It just kind of happens. Sometimes it happens right in the parking lot. Two people actually talk very deeply. One might share, "Oh my gosh, I think I may lose my job this week," or, "Gosh, I do not know what to do about my daughter." And there's this very intense, very good conversation that can happen there. That's that encouragement, that help, that wisdom, even just listening is a big part of what can happen in terms of helping people on their journey with Christ. And it can be very intentional. Two women meet for coffee, and they're discussing life, and they're also reading the scriptures or going through a piece of curriculum together. And it doesn't hit the website. No one knows it's going on, but it is going on, and it's transforming people. So, in the first part, in the worship service, we see proclamation and worship going on. In the front stage, you learn and apply. You also learn to kind of connect and what it means to love each other. And that's really helpful. That community, that fellowship is vital for us. In the backstage, you do get to accountability like no other place. It's easier to ask the tough questions. It's easier to get to the deep questions in the backstage. Luckily for all of us, only a few get to preach, and we all get to participate in worship, but only a few get to preach. In the front stage, some get to do it, right? So we pick certain people to lead Sunday school. We pick others to help out leading the men's or the women's groups. But in the backstage, really everybody can participate. Now, these are all things that help a church have a strong pathway. But there's also more because, if you like the theater, if you like any movie or you're binge watching some new show, you go, oh, you should watch this. It's natural. We just tell others. And so if you like what's going on in the theater of your church, in the learning and growing and the connecting, you naturally take it to outside of the walls. You just tell others. And for believers, this is a sense of, hey, that we share Jesus. We let others know who Christ is. That's taking the gospel outside of our walls. But it's also about the way that we serve. We serve others. We grow in maturity when we begin to have spiritual conversations with folks who do not know Jesus. We grow in maturity when I get to serve or you get to serve others. Could be at a soup kitchen, could be taking meals to someone who's sick. It could be just helping your neighbor take care of something at their house and they have a problem that you know how to solve. Well, that's service. You walk away from that, even though it takes time out of your day, encouraged and excited. And sometimes you grow more there. And so as we think about this theater, we need to think about, as a church, well, how do we evaluate these things that are going on? I'm reading this really interesting book called Deep Discipleship, and this pastor talks about this pathway. How do our pathways work? And, do we have all the pieces that we need is what he's talking about in here. Are the pieces that we have, the front stage, is it functional or dysfunctional? Is our backstage, is that working well or not working well? So we have to evaluate these. But the other question he asked I thought was very good. Are there pieces just missing from how your church does discipleship? You see, all these things contribute to you and I becoming more like Christ. See, I become more like Christ when I hear a good sermon and I think about it, or I worship in a different style that maybe doesn't fit quite me, but I say, hey, I'm coming here to worship. I learn when I lock arms with others and hear how they're doing. We read the scriptures together. I learn and grow when I talk to others about Jesus, when I'm a light for the gospel. So all these things need to be evaluated because we want everybody, we want our systems, the whole church, to help people move along in the path and not get lost in a hallway or a part of the church that doesn't help them grow and nurture and to become all that Christ wants them to be. Great to be with you today.